Hi guys, good morning. Thank you so much for joining. I will just give it a few minutes. We are Wednesday, December 6th. My name is Jade Calver. Thank you so much for joining. I will just give it a few minutes while we wait for everyone to join. And thanks again so much for joining. Great, guys. So thanks again so much for joining. As I said earlier, we are Wednesday, December 6th. We'll just get started in a minute. So my name is Jade Calver. I own and operate Calver Immigration Consulting Inc. We are a full-service immigration firm located in beautiful Ontario, Canada. This morning, I am doing something a little bit different. So I am just going to I'm going to do an overview of the policy changes and other changes within the Canadian immigration system over the past year. It has been a season of change. As you'll see. So we had lots of changes over the past year. Everything from, new programs being announced, extensions for different types of applications. So whether you're an applicant yourself, or maybe you are a lawyer or immigration consultant that is trying to just keep track of these changes, this seminar is for you. For those of you who are joining after the live session, thank you so much for watching. Again, you can reach out to me. I'm on all of the platforms, YouTube, LinkedIn, etc. So please reach out to us at any time. We're happy to help. So I will go ahead and share my screen. We're going to get into, I have a little presentation for you. So I'll get into the presentation and we can start taking a look at what were those changes over the past year. So what did that look like? So as I said, 2023 was a year of change. So again, if you're just joining, my name is Jade Calver. I am a regulated Canadian immigration consultant. I also hold the IRB license, so a full license with the College of Immigration and Citizenship Consultants. And thank you so much for joining me. I know things are busy as we lead up to the holiday season. So just again, I know I've already introduced myself. So my name is Jade Calver. I'm an RCIC. I have been working in immigration for a long time, so over a decade at this point. I worked with Immigration Canada as well as the Immigration and Refugee Board before going back into the private sector, where I worked in a large legal firm. And then about 10 years ago, I launched my own practice, Calver Immigration. I also own and operate Levo. So that's specifically for industry consultants. So immigration consultants and lawyers who, if you're looking for help with your cases, or if you're wanting to help grow your practice, I am here to help through that practice as well. So let's get into things. So 2023 was a year of change, but also stability. So this post-COVID era really saw a return to somewhat normal procedures. Those of you who were immigrating, maybe you're still trying to immigrate, or those of you who are consultants or lawyers who are trying to navigate the COVID times. I remember a moment when Trudeau in March of 2020 announced the borders were closing. That was a pretty scary moment for myself. I'm not sure for those of you, but it was a bit of a moment, a testing moment for myself when it comes to working in immigration. So, it's one of those things that we seem to be moving past, and we're getting to a point where things are stabilizing a little bit. So that's certainly nice for when it comes to those who are trying to prepare to immigrate or those who are helping people immigrate. So what I've done is we're going to go through it chronologically because that makes sense. So I've gone through the IRCC updates, the newsroom, my own personal notes to bring you a chronological overview of what happened over this past year. So I'm going through major changes. There are some I really picked from the different announcements what was the most relevant to the most amount of people. There are some like very niche changes, such as like, there was one for those affected, I think, by flooding in Nova Scotia. So most people were not affected by floods in Nova Scotia. Nothing, of course, against Nova Scotia. I love Nova Scotia, but if it wasn't too major of a change, I haven't covered it here. So January 2023, government servants our public servants were just getting back to work. So the international experience class reopened. It should reopen again January 2024. I've had lots of consultations recently with those who are wanting to get open work permits or the work permits under the recognized organizations. A lot of people don't understand that you can re-participate through the recognized organizations for international experience class. It's a really great stepping stone for employers to hire foreign workers through as well. So the IEC reopened in January 2023. Next, we have February. And just to note, I'll send out these slides afterwards as well, especially for immigration practitioners. I've put the links to all of these policies. Sometimes it's difficult. I don't know about you, but if you're preparing applications, it's hard to find those. It's sometimes hard to find those policy links, especially if they're a year old. It's hard to find those. So one of the biggest things is that in February 2023, so the year prior, IRCC had announced that those who are here in Canada as visitors could actually apply for a work permit from within Canada. So this wasn't the case previously, but now, and they've extended the policy, as you can see here, up until 2025. So that means that employers hiring those who are here on visitor status, previously those visitors had to leave or try to extend their status as a visitor. Now, if you have valid visitor status and you have a job offer, you can actually submit your application from within Canada, and that pilot's extended until 2025. So really helpful. It saves the person who is trying to apply for the work permit money because you don't have to go back to your home country. There are lots of benefits. Employers can actually use that pilot to their advantage. So there's really, that the policy is certainly helpful. On a negative note, biometrics were resumed for temporary applications for those in Canada. So during COVID, they paused biometrics. So biometrics are fingerprints for temporary applications. In February, they said that's no longer applicable. If you need biometrics, and you're in Canada, you are going to have to actually start doing them again. Next is we saw the extension and expansion of work permits for Hong Kong nationals. So they made some changes to the education requirement. So if you had graduated within the past 10 years, then you could apply for the work permit. They also opened a couple of new PR pathways for Hong Kong nationals. So obviously, this was in response to some of what was happening politically in Hong Kong. So we saw a couple of new pathways open for Hong Kong nationals. Caregivers, so those who are applying under the Caring for Children pilots or the home care provider pilots, they decreased how much work experience the person had to have in Canada. So previously it was 2 years. They knocked it down to 1. So that meant that those who are coming here on the work permits or those who are already here working as caregivers, on open work permits or LMIA-based work permits, they could actually just get the 1 year of experience as opposed to 2. So that was a great policy change for those who are working as caregivers. And then a big one, so for our Iranian clients, February 2023, again, another political response, of course, but the government announced the Iranian work permit pathways. So what this meant was that cost-free Iranians could apply for 3-year open work permits if they were already in Canada. So they had to already be in Canada. So far, this policy hasn't been renewed. So if you're an Iranian national and you're in Canada and you haven't applied for this, I would say apply for it. If you are a representative and you have Iranian clients, it's an open work permit for 3 years. I say, why not? And again, it expires at the end of February of next year, and they haven't announced an extension to it. There's been no mention of it as far as I can see in the news. So I would say, take advantage of this. And then I haven't put it here, but IRCC also said that they would, be a little bit more lenient with temporary applications from Iranians, which has been our experience as well, especially for visitor visas. So something to think about as well. Moving on to March 2023. So this was a big one. So we had, again, an 18-month work permit extension announced for postgraduate work permit holders. So they announced it in March. It came into effect in April. So this was building off of a postgraduate work permit extension they had done the previous year. So this one automatically happened if a person had had a postgraduate work permit up to a certain date. So it's up until it had to be expiring this year. So they then were eligible for an 18-month extension on their postgraduate work permit. This was, of course, due to the fact that lots of our students weren't able to work. They knew that our students weren't getting enough work experience to transition to permanent residency. So IRCC announced this 18-month work permit extension. There was another free permit extensions announced for Turkish and Syrian nationals who were already in Canada. And then the extension of the CUAET program. So this is for Ukrainian nationals. So they announced that those who were outside of Canada had until July 15th of this year to apply for the open work permits for Ukrainians. And that extension is for if those are already Ukrainians who are already here in Canada up until March 2024, they can apply for that work permit from within Canada. Moving on to April of 2023, not much happened. There was a small announcement for Sudanese nationals in Canada. Other than that, the news was pretty sparse when it came to updates from IRCC this month. Then in May 2023, perhaps April was slow because they were getting ready to make their announcements in May. So we had the extension of the agri-food pilot program into 2025 and expansion of the program. So if you look at that announcement from the minister, they extended the program into 2025, and they also expanded the program to include more occupation codes. So that was really helpful. I think that those of you practicing immigration, sometimes we forget about the agri-food pilot and we're trying to put them through the provincial or maybe express entry programs. But if you take a look at the agri-food pilot program, there are a lot of NOCs covered in agriculture and things to do with food processing. So that's a really great program that you can use for your clients. Next, IRCC announced a couple of countries. So Finland Finnish nationals can come to Canada on the working holiday visas. South Korea also expanded its eligibility. It's interesting with these international experience class permits, most of their youth permits, and youth is now being expanded up to the age of 35, up from 30. So that's really helpful because a lot of the time we can use these programs to bring people in on their work permits and bring their families. Next, I think one of the biggest ones, this is one of the big announcements I think from this year, is that there are major spousal updates. So the changes were that those who had applied for spousal sponsorship applications could get 30 days processing time on their TRV. So those are visitor visa applications if they had already filed for a spousal sponsorship application. And in addition to that, those who had done outland applications, so that's applications where the sponsored person is outside of Canada, they actually, previously they couldn't get a work permit, but now, as of this year, applicants can actually apply for an open work permit, even if they're outside. Well, they have to come to Canada first as a visitor, but then they can now get an open work permit, whereas previously that wasn't possible. So some nice changes under the spousal categories. Just to note on this 30-day TRV processing, they said that they're going to approve 90% of these applications and process them within 30 days. They've been pretty good as far as my files are concerned in my experience about processing the TRVs within the 30 days, but others are, I have had one or two refusals, unfortunately, so they're not actually approving all of them. So remember, if you're a representative filing these TRVs for applicants, don't forget about ties to home country, don't forget about dual intent. You really have to be careful with these applications. May 2023 also saw the minister announce draw specific rounds of invitation for express entry. So great for some if you had an occupation or if you're a French speaker so if you had an occupation that fell under one of these categories, or if you were a healthcare or a worker in STEM, great. If you are a worker that didn't fall under these categories, maybe you got bumped out of being eligible for express entry. June 2023, so this was a doozy month when it came to announcements for changes and updates in immigration. So the minister removed TRV requirements for 13 countries. I don't have them all listed here, but there's some countries in South America. So I know there's Argentina, Uruguay, some Caribbean countries, Trinidad, notably the Philippines was on there. So it said that if you've had a US or a Canadian visit visa in the last 10 years, no TRV required anymore. If you're a citizen of these countries and you've had that visa, you just apply for the electronic travel authorization. It's issued instantly, and then you're able to travel to Canada. This has been really helpful. So if you remember that visitor to worker policy that I mentioned earlier, those who are hiring from within Canada, it gives them a much bigger pool of foreign applicants to hire from, because a lot of these people who previously had to apply through the visa office abroad were able to come to Canada, and then we applied for them from within Canada. Next is at the Collision. So that's the big tech conference in Toronto that happened. So we saw the H-1B open work permit stream. So that was 10,000 H-1B open work permits. So if you had an H-1B work permit in the US, Canada said 10,000 spots for these H-1B holders and their families. They got open work permits for 3 years. They also said there's the innovation stream under the International Mobility Program. They never actually launched that, so to be determined with that one. They said that they're going to return to a 14-day speed of service for the global skills strategy stream. So those who were filing for certain LMI exempt work permits, or those under the global talent stream, you're supposed to get 14-day processing on your work permits. So that's super helpful. They also announced that there would be a digital nomad program for Canada. It hasn't launched yet either. So the minister made lots of announcements. I see online some, I don't know if they're actual real representatives or if they're ghost consultants, but they're saying Canada has this digital nomad program, but I'm tempted sometimes to comment. I don't say anything, but I want to say, show me where this program is actually announced. The fact is, it's not. And my critique of the digital nomad program is that it already kind of existed. The minister said in his announcement that that people would be able to come to Canada for 6 months and work for their foreign company and then apply for a work permit. But you can kind of already do that under current legislation. So I'm not sure that this was really much of an announcement. They said that they would do STEM draws in express entry, so science, technology, engineering, math occupations, startup visa improvements. So startup visa, they said that it was going to be an open work permit instead of a closed work permit, some priority processing for certain types of applications. So they also said we're going to be harder on startup visa applications in certain regards. So they've actually enacted all of the additional requirements of applicants, but startup visa clients can't actually, they haven't issued these open work permits yet. So they haven't actually made the changes to help applicants under startup visa. But I mean, I think that the minister talking about startup visa really showed that it was an important and probably permanent part of the Canadian immigration system. So that was really reassuring as well. Next, we have the announcement that workers can enroll as students part-time or full-time without a study permit. So if they have a work permit that they applied for before June 7th of this year, then they can actually go and study part-time or full-time without having to get a study permit. Just be careful here if you're an applicant or a representative, because if you're studying full-time in Canada, your work experience actually won't count for programs like Express Entry. So it's interesting to me that they launched this program without actually, saying, by the way, be careful because your work experience won't count if you apply for Express Entry. June 2023, so I mentioned the prior month in May, they said that the government would do its first occupation-specific rounds under Express Entry. So we saw the government do its first medical professional round of invitation in Express Entry, and then there was a STEM draw. It also then announced, and this was a big one too, in my opinion, so they did the expansion of the Francophone Mobility Work Permit Program. So this saw French speakers. So they lowered the level of French that the Francophone Mobility Work Permit applicants had to have. And they also said any tier level is fine. So previously it was high skilled tiers that had to have in order to qualify for this work permit. So this is really the government saying, you know what, if you speak an intermediate level of French and you have a job offer in Canada outside of Quebec, we'll give you a work permit. So representatives, especially if you're in recruitment, let me tell you, French speakers are the way to go this year because the government is really expanding on its Francophone targets. July, so we got into the summertime, July 2023. So again, back to that Francophone target, they said, we're inviting those who have a high French level in Express Entry. So they did a round of invitation in Express Entry for Francophones. They took away the education requirement in the Hong Kong pathways for permanent residency. Again, I mentioned earlier, so the international experience class, they said for UK youth, so British youth, up to the age of 35, for both open work permits and young professionals, they could access a work permit. So this is really great for British nationals trying to come to Canada and employers trying to hire them. A pathway for permanent residency was finally announced for Ukrainians. It opened in October of this year. Some critiques of the program was that you had to have some sort of family member. The Ukrainian had to have a family member in Canada in order to apply. So they did open these pathways, but it wasn't everybody who was here on the work permit. Hopefully in the future, we'll see some expansion to that program as well. We saw a trades draw and express entry. So those who are working in the trades, they did a specific occupation, specific round for that. August, nothing happened again. Public servants on vacation. So they signed an international experience class agreement with Iceland. Not that exciting. I'm not sure how many Icelandic nationals want to come to Canada. It's cold here too. September. So what we had all been waiting for, and my clients who had immigrated in the last few years had all been waiting for, was the announcement that the parent and grandparent program was opening. So the downside was that the government said, we'll only invite those who submitted their names in 2020. I think that this was the government trying to be a little bit more fair to those who had been waiting from 2020. But again, maybe somebody has been here for 10 years and just didn't submit their name in 2020. So the government invited applicants to sponsor their parents only if they had been in the pool in 2020. So those who were in the pool got lucky. Those who weren't had to, suck it up and say maybe next year. So we'll see. I don't envision that the parent-grandparent program is going to get better anytime soon. I don't have it here, but they did announce, I'm not sure if it was in the last year or late 2022, the super visa. So that's the visitor visa. That's a long-term visit visa for parents. Parents can now come in for up to 5 years at a time. So, it's the government saying, we know we're not doing a very good job with the parent-grandparent program, but here, look, we'll let your parents come in for 5 years at a time. Next, we got into October, so into the fall. There was a bit of a diplomatic kerfuffle between India and Canada. So they reduced their staff in India. So there was a bit of panic in the immigration world then, obviously with Canada being so reliant on workers and students coming from India. Luckily, for the most part, since it's been resolved. There was also an announcement that there's a priority visitor visas for Moroccans and free extensions for Moroccans, which was those affected by an earthquake in Morocco. November, so a few announcements worth noting. So they said they're going to be faster with their international experience class visas. There were priority visitor visas for Moroccans. Sorry, I just went over that. There was a new pathway for Colombians, Venezuelans, and Haitians announced. So it is it's interesting because it's being done not through the refugee programs. It's just Canada saying, if you are a Colombian, Venezuelan, or Haitian, and you're living in what I would call the global south, so Mexico or further south, you can actually apply for permanent residency. So that was interesting. We'll see how quickly that program fills. My thoughts are probably quite quickly, but interesting. It's a humanitarian program that's being, done out of kind of the goodwill of the Canadian generosity. We'll see what happens. And then here, I also noted one of the big changes in the last month. Service Canada announced wage floor changes to most of the occupation codes. They do this every year, but I just thought I would bring it up because some of the wages jumped in about $20 per hour. So if you're an employer filing for LMIAs and then you were about to submit or have a pending application, then all of a sudden you might have to increase your wage that you're offering by $20 per hour. For many employers, that's just not feasible. So again, representatives or employers need to go back and take a look at maybe different occupation codes, a different type of job that you can offer. You're a foreign worker, maybe you can do the wage increase. That was a big one that happened this month. So of course, December, we're halfway through, but as you can see, the government doesn't tend to make many changes up around the holidays and in August. So these are kind of my predictions for December 2023, that should say, and looking ahead to 2024. So what about express entry draws? We haven't seen express entry draws in a few months. There were technical problems, there are glitches. If you've been following the news online, there are technical glitches with express entry. So when it comes to those who have current applications, IRCC said we'll extend the time that you have to apply for permanent residency. And I think, honestly, they're just saving face by not inviting more people into a system that doesn't work properly to submit a PR application. So I think I would be surprised if we see anything before the new year, unless it's a provincial nominee draw. They do those often because they have another stakeholder, which are the provinces that are depending on them to do draws. But I really don't see probably much happening before January. I think we'll also see, when I was talking about those STEM programs that they announced at Collision, I think that we'll probably see some of those programs. Hopefully they'll get it together and actually, enact some instructions for the digital nomad program. They also said that they would run some programs that were LMI exempt for STEM workers. So I think we'll see that happen as well. I thought I would bring it up. We might have a new government in the next year on the federal level. If that happens, those of you who are representatives or employers who have lived through federal government changes in immigration, as you know, in the first year, all I can say is hold on to your hats, because lots of changes happen when a new federal government is announced. I also wanted to finish off by saying, look to the P&Ps, whether you're an applicant or a representative, especially with express entry, so the federal programs becoming so competitive, don't be afraid of the P&Ps, learn them well. I also think that the P&Ps are really innovative when it comes to their permanent residency program. So take a look at those. And then just to finish off, people have asked me, so when I'm mentoring, consultants or lawyers who are new to immigration, they say, how do you keep it on top of all of these changes? So I say, look at it daily. I take a look at the newsroom, and there's an IRCC update page. I look at those daily because you don't want to be caught unaware. If you're doing things like LMIAs, so that's through a different department. So honestly, they don't tell you. So you have to look at the website, I would say at least weekly, just to make sure that nothing's changed, because they'll make changes and then they won't announce it. So there are lots of different things that you need to keep track of. And so if you're a representative, that is your job. So thank you so much for joining. If you would like to book a consultation with me, so if you're a hopeful immigration applicant, you can book your consultation online. I have a special 2023 price down from $250 for a consultation. If you book before the end of the year for a consultation in January, I have a consultation fee of $199 Canadian, which is down from my regular price, as I said, of $250. I'll send out a follow-up email with a link that you can book that through. If you are a immigration consultant or lawyer who's watching, please DM me on LinkedIn, or you can email me directly for my link to join my Facebook group. I have a Facebook group of consultants and lawyers where we share practice tips, so please join. I also offer through Levo, I have a helpline for immigration consultants and lawyers. I do LMIA training and training in other immigration topics, and I also do mentoring when it comes to your business growth. So thank you so much for joining. I will open up the floor for questions for the next 15 minutes. If you're watching either live or after the fact, thank you so much for joining. You can follow me on YouTube. Please subscribe to my YouTube channels where I post weekly updates on Canadian immigration. You can also follow me on LinkedIn or on Instagram. I post on those channels regularly. Again, my immigration practice is calverimmigrationservices.com. And if you are an immigration consultant or a lawyer, levosolutions.ca is my business mentoring website. So again, if you're looking for co-counseling, if you've taken on a file where you're unsure of what to do, you can always reach out to me. I'm happy to help. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat. I will take a look at them. And thank you so much for joining. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas if you're celebrating. And I will see you in the new year. And thank you so much for joining. Great. So I will pop on over to the Q&A section. Dorcas from Italy says, this is Iron Lady, sorry. So what is the processing time for spousal sponsorship outside of Canada? So right now it's about, they go up and down. I would say on average, it's about 1.5 years for processing for a spousal application. This is assuming you have no problems, you don't get an interview, you aren't requested additional documentation. So that is the processing time. I would plan for about 1.5 years. I have another question. So Marcia says, when do you think the instructions of open work permits will be announced for startup visa? Well, Marcia, it's interesting because when you submit an open work permit under startup visa right now, so it actually, you put it through as open, like the category is open. So for all intents and purposes, you would think that they would be open work permits, but I've had applications where I've submitted under the open work permit category and then they're approved and they're still closed work permits. So like my clients fly in and it's a closed work permit. So, you still have, I'm not sure is the answer. I think that the government is slow to make these changes. I think in June, the minister made all of these changes and then the government didn't know what to do with it. So I think that hopefully in the coming year, we'll see the open work permit be applied, but for now it's still a closed work permit. Another person asks, I've heard the open work permits are being considered for the current primary closed work permit holders under startup visa. So same question, I think I've just answered that. Manish asks, thanks Jade, is the express entry glitch also for express entry profile builder before the ITA is received? Manish, I've done a couple of profiles this week. So I haven't had any issues in the profiles as of yet. I think it was when the person received the invitation to apply and then was submitting. I think that that's when they, I think that that's where the glitch was. And then everyone was having, understandably was concerned about it. And so they were, so they were saying, we'll give you a little bit more time to fix this issue in express entry. So that's where that glitch is. Jitesh asks, what are the terms and conditions for a closed work permit holder to apply for one? So I have full seminars on that, Jitesh, but closed work permits, so it means that if you're on a closed work permit, it means that an employer has effectively sponsored you for a work permit in Canada. So that means that the employer has already done what's called a labor market impact assessment, or you're exempt from having to get one. And then what happens is that you apply for the work permit. You have to usually show that you're qualified for the position. And then depending on the program and the skill level, you usually get a closed work permit. It's usually issued for 2 years or 3 years. And then on a closed work permit, you can only work for that employer in Canada. Next person asks, when will the CEC, so that's the Canadian Experience class draws under Express Entry, resume? So the last all program draw came in October 10th. I wish, anonymous, that I had a crystal ball when it came to CEC draws. you know, in the past years, if you look back through the draws, there were periods of time where they just did all program draws forever. You know, Immigration Canada has no obligation to do just CEC draws. Like they can do, they can do all program draws and never do a CEC draw again. I think that hopefully in 2024, with our international students who are just not getting permanent residency, that they'll hopefully start to do CEC draws again. But and just to that point, I think that we'll probably see some students be I think that we'll probably see programs that address students a little bit more, because there's a growing resentment of students who have come and paid hundreds of thousands of dollars and they have no hope at permanent residency. So I think that the government will probably start to address that. Sudha says, what is the best way to contact IRCC for a PRTD application? I have 3 in process from forever. So Sudha, I'm assuming you're a consultant or a lawyer. Yeah, PRTD applications are not quick. They're processed through the visa office. I would say submit a web form and address the program manager. I find that the web forms, if you don't specifically address somebody in the office, they will just get put into queue and then eventually reviewed by the general, the general reception intake. So if you address the program manager and flag them as urgent, then I think that you'll have a little bit more success. Someone asks about, is there an increased chance of work permit rejections for essential co-founders in the startup visa program for Iranian nationals relating to the war in Gaza? I mean, I think that, thanks for your question. I mean, that's hard to know. I think that they know for the most part, people are trying to leave Iran. I mean, the conflict might be a proxy conflict for Iran. I don't think it would affect it that much, honestly, unless something spreads across the region. I don't think it's going to be much of a consideration. Bill says, thank you very much. Perfect presentation. Thank you so much, Bill, for joining. Gurmeet asks, how will the federal government impact the immigration? So Gurmeet, when a new government comes into power, they like to put their stamp on immigration. Historically, governments will always make their biggest policy changes within the first year of being in office, especially if they are afraid that they're going to lose power. So a lot of the time they'll push through all of their changes. If we have a conservative government, which is assuming who we would go to the next time, then they might change processing their programs they probably won't like. So they would probably change those to make it so that they're putting their own mark on immigration. Angela asks, I want to apply for my study visa. Can you help me on visa lodgement? I sure can. So as I said, book a consultation online. I have a discount for those booking this month for my consultations in January. Megan asks, hi, thanks for the presentation. If they issue a closed work permit for us under SUV and they implement the changes, can we change our work permit for them? I would think so, Megan. So if you would have to apply again for the work permit, but I see no harm in applying for a new work permit if they say, okay, they're now actually open and you're here on a closed work permit. However, with startup visa work permits, I mean, the whole purpose of you being here on a startup visa is to apply, is to come urgently and be working on your business. I know people they're saying that it's open so that people can, start working on, start earning some income on the side. But I'm actually a little bit hesitant about telling people to get the open work permit, because if you're not if you're not working on your business full-time and you're distracted by a job that you have on the side, part-time or full-time, you just have to be really careful, because we want you working full-time on that business. So I think, yes, you can, but you just have to be careful about making sure that your business is the priority. Arian asks, I received my job offer last March. Until now, I'm waiting for my work permit. You can email me about this, Arian. We can take a look at it. Work permits are processed according to your visa office of the country in which you reside. So if you are residing in that country, then there should be a standard processing time for your work permit. If your work permit has exceeded processing time for that country, then you can start to send web forms. So something to think about. Sadhu says, what advice would you give to a person who meets all the requirements to immigrate to Canada through the PNPs, but you don't require the amount of money? There's a work permit application, Sadhu. So my advice would be a job offer. Proof of funds are less important once you have a job offer in Canada. And then you can go through the PNP or you can go through the work permit program. And then once you're in Canada on a work permit, most of the programs don't require you to have the settlement funds. So I think my biggest advice would be obtaining that job offer. Anonymous asks, you guys have got lots of questions. We'll go until noon. What's the difference between essential and non-essential members in a startup visa? So essential it means that they're essential to the business. So it means that if you are applying for permanent residency, the essential person, you can't run the business without that person. Non-essential means that if that person doesn't get approved for their visa, that you guys can still run the business without them. So that's really the difference between the two. Renata asks, can I apply for a spousal visa before I travel to Canada? So our separation time will be 12 months apart. So Renata, so you can apply if you already have a visa for Canada. So you can either apply for the out of Canada application and then travel, or you can do the in Canada application. A lot of people rush to do an in Canada application, but then they don't realize that they're stuck in Canada. They can't work here for 6 to 8 months. They shouldn't leave the country. So, sometimes an outland application, especially with that new work permit that's available for applicants. So sometimes an outland application actually makes more sense. So, if we have a consultation, we go through those two different options for you. And then we really, hash out what makes the most sense for you and for your family. Moaz says, what's the time frame to process LMIAs for international hiring? So they're not super quick right now, Moaz. So if an employer is applying for an LMIA right now, they have to advertise for 4 weeks, and then they have to wait for the processing time. On average, I tell employers wait for 3 months for processing. So it's about 4 months start to finish for applications. Zara says, this is about startup visa work permits again. Zara, why don't you email me? I'm happy to go over those if you'd like. Ali asks, does the commitment certificate have to be valid when an SUV applicant applies for the work permit after SUV application has been submitted? Ali, I've always made sure that mine are valid. I don't apply for work permits with an expired letter of support. I think that that's really risky. I think that an officer could say, your LOS is expired, so you don't qualify. So I always ask for, I always go back to the designated entity and get a new letter of support. Anonymous says, great webinar. Thank you, Jade. Thanks for coming. Any idea if PR by investment program is going to open? Quebec just said that they're resuming their investor program, so there's that one. Anonymous says, thank you for your presentation. Can you talk more about co-counsel and how that would look? Sure. So if you're an immigration consultant or a lawyer, I can work with you as your co-counsel on an application. So if someone has hired you already, or if they're wanting to hire you, I can either do the assessment for you, or if they've already hired you, we can both be counsel on the application, and I walk you through the steps and teach you how to prepare and submit and track an immigration application. Sahil says, I am from India. I want to continue with an ICT transfer from India. Is physical presence necessary to open the company and start a business there, or can I stay in Canada? So I think that you're talking about ICTs for startups. So yeah, so high level, you can establish an entity in Canada and then you transfer yourself as the executive from the foreign branch to the Canadian branch. And then usually we see you work for a year here, and then we can apply through express entry. There are other business immigration programs to heal. So there are a few different options for you. We do lots of business immigration, so please reach out. Happy to help. Anonymous says, your marketing is amazing. Thank you. I have a wonderful marketing manager, Kelly, who helps me. So kudos to Kelly. I'm assuming she's watching. Anonymous asks, is it affected for if their applications, oh, this is a startup visa question. So if someone's PR application is non-essential, can I weaken the PR application? No, not necessarily. Especially if you're a team of 5, you know, theoretically, like let's say you're a chief marketing officer, like no offense to marketers, but I know we were just talking about my marketer, but often you can hire someone else to do the marketing, whereas your chief technology officer or your CEO, you usually can't swap that person out. Like they're usually essential, right? You usually can't, swap that person out. Someone's asking about judicial review. Send me an email about judicial review. I have a great partner who helps with judicial review. Someone asks, I have a full-time corporate role during my study permit, and the 40-hour rule allowed me to join that company, and now I'm on a work permit, but I'm not sure if my experience will start from the time I joined the company or when I got my work permit. So for economic class immigration, both the federal and provincial class, you need to be on a work permit to count that work experience. So it's great that you're working as a student because you're getting experience. So it's good for you personally, but for the immigration application, you'll have to be working on your work permit to count the Canadian work experience. Someone says, can you book a session with me in December? I'm booking for early January, Angela, so please reach out to me. Happy to help. Anonymous says, you are amazing, Jade. Thank you so much for your kind comments. How soon would you send your email link to book a consultation? I will send those out tonight, and you guys will get my link for my January booking. So I think I will stop it there. We're almost at the 1 hour mark. Thank you everyone for joining. Again, if you are joining after the fact, after I went live, thank you so much for joining. You can book online with me at calverimmigrationservices.com. If you're a consultant or lawyer, levosolutions.ca is my booking link. Thanks again for your time, and thanks for joining. And I will send out a link with my consultation booking for January. And thanks again. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and all the best for the new year.